And before I introduce our next presenter, I just wanted to thank a few people without whom this all would not have been possible. Emily Dahl from the MIT Energy Initiative, who's around here somewhere, who's just been a fantastic partner in all this, and so thank you, Emily. Dan Pomeroy, who is here from the International Policy Lab, many of you have been in touch with. And so, Dan, thank you. International Policy Lab does some great work. And Bethany Patton, who's not here from the Sloan Sustainability Initiative. And then last to the team at MIT Conference Services and Caroline Livingston, MIT Video Productions, MIT AV, fantastic work, so thank you very much. All this would not have been possible without you, so we're lucky. So with that, our last but not least power presenter, my pleasure to introduce Dorn Cox, who actually wears multiple hats, but he's today he's research coordinator for the Wolf's Neck Center for Agriculture and the Environment in Freeport, Maine, which actually I have been to, and if you are ever find yourself in Freeport, which is not too far from Portland, I encourage you to get over. It's a beautiful spot. So we're thrilled to have Dorn, and Dorn, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm hoping to tell a little bit of a different story and come at climate change from really a different angle and the role that agriculture plays as we look to mitigating and adapting to climate change. So we've heard a lot about the surplus of atmospheric carbon, but we haven't heard quite so much about the deficit in our soils globally. And the history of agriculture has really been one of soil degradation, and yet we know it's really important for land security. And we're learning more and more that it's also important as we adapt, that as we improve our soils, it's a win-win situation. We can be more resilient to flooding, we can reduce vulnerability to drought, we can recharge groundwater systems, and it's important to farm viability and reduction of farm inputs. And it's a major part, land degradation is a major part in food security as well, of course. So there's a win-win situation in terms of changing the way in which we do agriculture. And we know now the way it's conventionally practiced that as much as 20% of greenhouse gas emissions are from agriculture, and yet if we transform the way we conduct agriculture, estimates range from 2 gigatons to even higher annually for soil-based carbon sequestration. So Leonardo da Vinci once said that as much as that we know more about the heavens above than the soil beneath our feet, and that has really been the case until relatively recently. And really, it's part of the last decade of biotech revolution that's enabled us to understand the complexity of the soils and the living organisms. In a handful of soil, there are billions of organisms, and that complexity has really been not understood, and yet that's the difference. And our modern agriculture has aimed to simplify that system rather than embrace that complexity. And the system in terms of getting soil carbon and organic matter in that provides these wonderful benefits and increasing groundwater retention and nutrient retention and mitigating floods is really a process that created a livable planet in the first place. It's photosynthesis that grows roots. Those roots then feed that microbiome, and it's that microbiome feeding on itself deep in the soil that actually accumulates carbon. This is a relatively new idea in some sense. And so deeper roots equals deeper life equals deeper soil carbon. And so what we're looking at is changing the culture of the agriculture means culture of the field, and changing our culture of the field and recognizing that people are part of this culture, management is part of the culture, and we're managing, again, this above ground biomass, but also this below ground life. And so we're now at the transition where we can start to unlock some of this knowledge. But It's a knowledge-limited system rather than a input-limited system. And so we're looking at, we're, again, as a knowledge-limited system, we're limited at the rate in which we can communicate this knowledge and what is the pace at which we can take what works in one specific location and apply that in another location elsewhere on Earth. And so I'm really pleased to be part of the Wolf's Neck Center for the Agricultural Environment to create a collaborative test bed that demonstrates practices and a public science that creates intersections between the general public, the 30,000 visitors we have there, but also intersect with farmers and researchers, and then also create a replicable template that can be applied elsewhere. So the practices of monitoring these systems is especially important because while the processes on the ground may differ in different environments and different soil conditions and different climates, the process of measuring it and sharing it is actually quite similar. And so there's a history in agrarianism of just this, of open source knowledge exchange as being the key. And this is an image from 1918, Sears and Roebuck Catalog for Encyclopedia of Practical Farm Knowledge, illustrating a community club as the heart of a circulatory system of ideas, information, and inspiration, recognizing that knowledge is the limiting factor in transforming the landscape, and that it's a public endeavor. Agriculture is a shared human endeavor. It's part of, in the history of agriculture, is often one of pre-competitive space, where we agree that agriculture benefits all, and let's compete once we have an abundant landscape. And so we now have new tools, of course, to follow that same circulatory system for knowledge. And open source tools and low-cost sensors and communications and analytics are really proliferating. It's part of what's ushered in this new era. And so harnessing that to create farmer-driven, peer-to-peer observation tools that allows for a high level of accuracy and participation and democratize essentially access to environmental data for the farm, but also to be able to aggregate that data in common formats across the landscape and provide feedback into location-specific decision support tools, because every location is different. Rather than homogenizing a best management practice, an expert-driven system, we can move to data-driven systems. And that's really a radical transformation. So the tools we use are really, again, a reflection of the environment that we're working on. And software is really the way in which we express our understanding of the environment. So software, again, is the way in which we understand systems and we express systems, not just environmental systems, but social systems and economic systems. So quantifying, moving from expert-based opinions to quantifying to quantification is also what we need to drive environmental service markets and to value these systems. And so we are building a network of farms through the soil health movement. We now have a USDA division of soil health recognizing this process and building networks with other networks. And we bring this together essentially in summary. Our task is to use the millions of years of genetic diversity and evolution that's expressed in our seeds and genetics all over the world that has done this process, essentially creates photosynthesis almost everywhere on Earth, adapt and improve that to restore using our carbon silicon nervous system that's based on the internet and applied to the landscape to then restore, balance, and enhance the systems everywhere on Earth that can feed and fuel and support us all. So thank you very much.